I'm not Father Mike, and this isn't Ascension Presents. Death. Do you fear that it is lurking around every corner? Or are you more feeling young and I've got time? Paranoid or carefree? Maybe we should be somewhere in the middle. I'm not Father Mike, and this isn't Ascension Presents. Just kidding. I'm Chad, and this is Chalice Chapels. So, John chapter 11, it's this very complicated story about this guy Lazarus. And he dies, and then Jesus shows up a few days later and raises him from dead. So maybe it's not that complicated. Maybe it's a simple story. I don't know. But John chapter 11 also contains one of those famous verses. It also happens to be one of the shortest verses. He wept. Jesus, that is. So why is Jesus weeping? What's he crying about? I don't know. I wasn't there. And some people say maybe it's because Lazarus died and he was mourning the loss. Other people say maybe it's because people didn't believe he was going to be able to do anything about it. It's something that we need to sort of figure out for ourselves. Maybe it means all of those things. But my thoughts on death were recently challenged. I used to kind of buy into this saying that's also quite popular, that you are not a body with a soul, but a soul with a body. And I didn't used to think death was that big of a deal. I'm always afraid that it's going to hurt, but death was always something that I almost looked forward to because, well, I read scripture and heaven's going to be awesome. But I was listening to someone speak on some other scripture about death, and they were mentioning that the Catholic teaching is not that soul and body are something separate, but something that is together, very much one thing. God gets to be a trinity, we get to be like a bi-unity or something. We're soul and body at the same time. And it's this separation of soul and body that makes death so painful, it hurts. There's a real, mourning that people have to go through for that. And as this person was speaking on that, it kind of challenged my thoughts on that a little bit, that, I used to always think, well, death's no big thing. God, whatever. People die, it's not the end, it's just sort of it's a comma, it's a period. And it's not a period, it's a comma. Anyhow, and I still think of death as not that big a deal. It's kind of like when you're being born. You transition from this warm, sort of quiet, muffled, wet environment, and you go through somewhat of a traumatic process, and you end up in the world where it's cold and the light is very bright, and for whatever reason you cry. And I think death is very similar. We'll go through some sort of transition, probably sort of traumatic, but then you end up somewhere better. So what's my point? I don't know really. But I think we should all take some time today or this week and read John chapter 11 for ourselves. We're not kids. We don't have to be read to. Really, you need to read it for yourself and pay attention to when Jesus wept and why he wept. And just pray on that and think about it this Lent. Take some time to find some middle ground between being paranoid of death and being a little too carefree, maybe, so that we don't take every day for granted, but we're also not living paralyzed. So read your Bible.